This is the Past Lives Podcast, episode 19. I'm your host, Simon Bown. My mission here at the Past Lives Podcast is to investigate evidence that demonstrates survival of the human soul. We will look at past life memories, near-death experiences, spirit communication, and other incredible phenomena. You can visit my website at www.pastliveshypnosis.co.uk. This week I have a return guest, Cliff Aguirre, and we will be talking about his book, The Death Transition, The Process of Passing Over. It describes the step-by-step experiences an individual will encounter upon death. Welcome to the Past Lives Podcast, Cliff. Great to have you back.
Oh, really? Well, I'm happy to be back.
And this time we're talking about another one of your books, which was all about what happens to you after you die.
Yes, the death transition, the process of passing over. And what had happened, somebody come back, and he had died from like a dose. Not that I was into that, but he was. Suddenly there he was standing to the side of my bed, and he was talking to me, and he was going, I really messed up, I'm really, really upset with myself and everything. And then after that, I started having a lot of dreams with him, talking about his life and everything. And about 2 years later, I had somebody else die, and she came back. And suddenly she was standing next to my bed also, telling me all about, her. And I'd have dreams of both of them sometimes. In one of the dreams, I was told, you're going to be the death transition. So I woke up and went, okay, And suddenly they started telling me all about what they experienced by when they passed over. And it was just like channeling, That's kind of how the book came about. This is the second edition that I've put out.
And when they were standing next to your bed, what did they look like? Were they almost ghost-like?
It was actually like they were physically there, but I could only see from their waist up. And they were looking down at me and talking to me. And it was just like talking to them.
Do you think there's a reason why you could just see them from the...
I don't know, but that's what people have just seen their relatives from the waist up. I really don't know why.
Is it just them that gave you the information, or was there anyone else involved?
It was mostly the two of them, okay? But then I would have these dreams, and every so often it felt like a group collective. That's the only way I could explain it. It was like I could feel that there was, like 4 or 5 entities or whatever talking to me, and they were giving me information also. And I didn't know what to expect every time I went to bed, Yeah. And when I got up in the morning, I was going, how many other people are experiencing this, And it was pretty life-changing, This group would actually send me on little errands. Like they would go, go to the bookstore and go look up this person's name, or go to this store or do this. And suddenly, I don't know if you ever heard of Seth Speaks by Jane Roberts.
Yes.
Well, I went to a bookstore and I was going, okay, I don't know why I'm going to the bookstore, but they told me to come to a bookstore. And suddenly Jane Roberts' book was like in my face. And I brought it home, I read it, and that was life-changing also. It was just everything about what I believed about life and death and art. And then I put it together with my friend Jim and my friend Kim and what they were telling me and what this other group was telling me. And it's like this whole big picture started coming together.
Have you had any other spirit communication before that? Is this something that you grew up with?
Well, when I was a young child, I used to have ghosts, I would say ghosts, kind of figures. They were kind of like, they were like people, but they were almost transparent. And the bedroom that I had, the backyard, and it was locked. But I would wake up and I would see these people floating in from my back door. And it was like they didn't even notice me, but I certainly noticed them. And for like a 7, 8-year-old kid, it was like, oh my gosh, put the covers over my head, you know? And then the first time that I really had somebody come to me that I knew was my grandmother. It was 6 years old. And I woke up and found her standing in the doorway of my bedroom. I wasn't scared one bit. I knew it was her. I could feel this love just coming out towards me, you know? But then in the morning, I went and asked my mother, were you standing in my doorway? Even though I did that clarification, what was that I just experienced? So that was the very first time I ever saw anybody that I really knew.
So in your book, you talk about pre-death and after-death guides.
Well, what I found out was that, people that know that they're, going to pass away, like if they're ill or whatever, I'm not necessarily saying that they may always, know really clearly on this day or whatever, but they know that they're sick or whatever. And when they get close to the time of their passing, they will see a relative show up or somebody to show up. Like if you're at home, some of you may have had this happen or heard about your sick relative is going, oh, Aunt Mary's here, and you're looking around the room going, 10 years ago. But this person actually sees Aunt Mary. Well, Aunt Mary is there to say, come on, it's time to pass over and I'm going to take you with me and everything. So those are like pre-death guides. People that have real traumatic deaths that happen very quickly, like the 2 friends that I have, usually don't see the pre-death guide before they pass away. But when they leave their body, there's somebody standing there with them.
And that's the guides?
Right, the pre-death guides.
I talked to somebody else about this on the podcast who talked about deathbed visions.
Right.
It sounds just like that. So in the book, you talk about a process where you look back on your life and review it. Can you go through this process?
Well, what they were telling me about was that, after they passed over and they had their pre-death guides, they walked them through the whole process, of their funeral and all that. And then after that was over, they moved them forward. And that's at the point where they started separating themselves from the people they knew in the physical life and started focusing more on the after-death environment. And what they were telling me was that then they had to start looking back at their lives and looking at the stuff that they were successful at or the stuff they should have done better. And what they told me was that this was a very educational and healing thing for them, because they were telling me that not everybody will be perfect. We're going to have glitches in our lives also. But they got to look and review and kind of analyze all that they did that was right, all they could have done better. And it actually allowed them to grow as spirits, and become, more aware of who they are as a whole, if that sounds clear, So it was like going back to school. When my father passed away, he came back to me in a dream. And there was this man that was talking to me, and my father was in the background. He was sitting at a school desk, actually. And I was asking this guy, how's he doing? And this guy was telling me, oh, your father's doing fine and everything. My father was sitting at this desk, and he looked over at me, and he waved, and then he went back to writing on a piece of paper or whatever he was doing. And so he must have been in school, or he must have been doing his, past life evaluation.
Where you would study each part of your life and learn the lessons that you need to learn from each thing.
Right. And what they were telling me also was that from some of the things that you review, you will also be planning your next life. You know, well, I could have done this better, so maybe in my next life I'll do this a little better, or maybe the life after that I'll do this again. And they were telling me also that you review the relationships you had with different people, and what the different relationships meant, and what you learned by all the relationships you had and the actions that you took. And it's quite amazing what they were telling me.
And is there much emotion in this process?
They told me that it was very emotional. They were telling me that the people that want, that expect to die, and suddenly they're going to take this big long vacation and there's not going to be any worries whatsoever. They were telling me, well, that's not quite true. They say when you first pass over, if you need to relax, take a break, regroup, there's a possibility that you can do that. And
you're talking about how the spirits were telling you that when you pass over, that it's not all just a holiday.
Oh, yeah. Right. So there are times when, you can relax to regroup. But then after you regroup, you will move on and go, okay, I need to seriously look at all this stuff. And it's for your own benefit, your own expansion of knowledge about who you are. And they were also telling me that some people who, for instance, let's say, believe that if they commit suicide or whatever, all of their worries are going to be gone and they're not going to have to think about this ever again. And they said that's not true at all. Everything that you need to deal with now, you also need to deal with them then. But it's very, there's no emotions that are hidden. That's the other thing that they were telling me, is that they know what each other is thinking. And so you can't really hide your emotions like you can here. But they said that that's a very positive thing, though, because it allows them to grow and to nurture and to really be close to each other. But they say that also in our physical life right now, that it's important that we try to do all this stuff now also, because this is also a learning environment for us. And some people may think, well, I'm just struggling here. I'm going to work every day and, I'm just kind of was born and here I am. But in truth, this is a whole learning environment, and we need to actually change our focus to understand that that's what this is. And that's what they were telling me.
Also, in the book, you say, you talk about conflicts being caused by people who have forgotten their inner knowledge.
Conflicts that are caused by their inner knowledge? Well,
by they've forgotten their inner knowledge.
Yeah, they've forgotten it. Because when you're in that after-death environment or pre-life environment, which is the same, you're very aware of everything. You know what your plans are. You even know what you did in past lives and who you knew in past lives. And actually what they were telling me was that you still can have relationships with people that were in your past. And it's like one whole big family. And then when you get ready to be born into a new life, you're still aware of who you are. You're still aware of these other people. And then you're born. And they were saying that a baby and a young toddler will still remember little glitches, little memories of their past. And then as they get older, based upon our environment and what we're taught and everything, we start to lose that. For instance, when my oldest daughter, I think she was around 6 years old or something, she turned to me one day and she goes, "What do you think about reincarnation?" Well, for one thing, I didn't even know she knew the word reincarnation. But we started talking about it, and she said that she remembered things. And so I always encourage that with my kids. So when we talk about forgetting, it's because, we have different beliefs in this world. We have, church that teaches one thing. We have, politics. We have interfamily beliefs and everything. And that could actually cause us to close down and lose our memories. If we continue to be more open, like all this discussion that we're having and all the discussion that's happening around the world about, maybe we do live on and everything, that will keep the window open. And then if the window is left open, the child, as they grow up, will become so aware of who they really are as a spiritual entity. Right now, we've kind of lost that.
So why do you think it is that we forget our past lives and our reality of being a spirit or a soul when we were born? What do you think the purpose of that is?
I think it's a lot of peer pressure. And when I mean peer pressure, it's not just people, your age or anything like this, but, I've had some people who have done past life regressions with me, and they were saying, well, this kind of is a conflict with what I'm being taught in church. But they had so many experiences that suddenly said, but I can't ignore this either. I just saw this. I just felt this. So part of it is probably the dogma that we're brought up in about our spiritual beliefs. But then also at the same time, our whole work ethic and our whole environment as a society, right now the society's starting to get really open to the idea of maybe there is a possibility that we live afterwards and everything. But if you think back even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, this was not readily acceptable. And they actually mocked people for it. They actually put people in hospitals for talking about stuff like this. And talking about, seeing spirits and everything, they might consider that you're mentally ill or you're a stage show or something. So things have really progressed, but they still need to go farther. And once they go farther, then we will be a higher spiritual self also, the higher spiritual environment or vibration, if you want to say. And we start remembering this stuff.
If souls are born into this life, or born into many lives, they will need to experience all there is to be experienced. So does that mean that on Earth there will always be war and suffering?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, we have a long history of war and suffering, that goes on thousands and thousands of years. But what I was told was that the reason why we have all these wars and suffering is because we have forgotten that whole part of who we are as individual spiritual selves. Because once they pass over and they go, oh, I have this whole big gigantic realization. And suddenly I realize, I'm multiple personalities, I'm multiple races, I'm from multiple areas in the world, and suddenly this body doesn't mean anything to me anymore. Now I understand that I'm a little bit of just everything. And so all of these wars go on because they have forgotten that part. I mean, you go to the Middle East and you look at the wars that have been going on forever in the Middle East, and they're learning a lesson about living with each other, believe it or not. But the factor that keeps it going is that they've forgotten the one key factor in the whole big picture. And the whole big picture is that, sure, you may be Arab right now, but when you die, that whole image, that whole idea is gone. You're not just an Arab. You're not just a Jew. You're not just whatever race you want to talk about or location in the world. Suddenly that's meaningless. And I know some people will go, oh my gosh, that almost sounds sacrilegious. But actually, that's because you are such a higher self that these images and these titles really end up not meaning anything. So if in this world we suddenly realized, wait a second, I'm just experiencing this life as an educational play, let's say, or a learning environment or whatever. And if you knew, wait a second, this, who I am right now is just an image that I have right now, people might actually start realizing that they can live together, work together, and everything, because that's what they do after they pass away, if that makes any sense.
Another thing you talk about in your book is pre-death planning. Can you tell us about that?
This happens a lot when people are ill, let's say, but it also can happen if there's a big incident that is going to happen that they may play a part in, like a big tragedy. You could also have some pre-death planning in that too. But let's talk about the people that are ill. As they get closer to passing over, they may start doing things like, writing a will or being nostalgia or thinking about certain things more than before, or having actually dreams about, coming to terms with their lives and everything. And on a physical level, we may not even be aware of, well, I did this will. I don't know why, but I feel it's important. Or I had this dream about somebody that I knew 20 years ago or whatever, and it felt so real and everything. On a higher level, our whole spiritual self is getting ourselves prepared. On a physical level, we're down here with our ego, and our ego is going, okay, this is a little weird, let's get some boundaries going here. And so you're actually doing things that you may not be totally aware of the purpose for doing it. And then when the day of your passing over finally shows up, you'll be ready for it more than maybe you would have before.
It's kind of like your higher self is helping the consciousness, the person that you are at the time, to move towards death with more peace.
Right. Because the thing that they were telling me was that also we are such higher spiritual beings than what we allow ourselves to be. And imagine that, let's say there's a big brain or something. Just imagine it up in the sky or something. And there's this cord that goes down through the top of your head. And let's say information is flowing back and forth. You're interacting with this big brain in the sky or whatever. That's kind of an analogy that your higher self is constantly working with your physical self. And so people may, have communications and go, wow, what was that? Well, that's information, that's data that's being transferred down to you. And even in your sleep, you sit here and you go, wow, I was sound asleep, but I did so much stuff. I was talking to so many people, and I was thinking about so much stuff about what I needed to do. And some people solved problems while they were asleep. It's because that database, that big brain, just never stops. You're an interactive individual with your higher self and your physical self 24/7.
At Mass General Brigham, we're one against cancer. We provide leading cancer care with the most cancer specialists in New England. We're one team working together to provide care that puts our patients first. New collaborations, new approaches, and advanced treatments like the region's only proton therapy center are leading to new hope and possibilities. There's only one Mass General Brigham. Discover more at massgeneralbrigham.org/cancer.
So when you die, They say that you see a tunnel. Do you know what this tunnel is?
What they were telling me was that the tunnel was actually an analogy for the higher energy that you're now experiencing in your higher awareness. And you could say, well, does the tunnel really exist or it doesn't? It does. It may not be something that you could touch like the desk that I'm sitting at, but it's there because it's telling you, okay, you're widening your awareness of things. You're moving towards this big, gigantic knowledge base, and you're going to be meeting up with people in this new environment and everything. So it is that higher awareness that this tunnel impresses upon you.
And you say in the book that the individual creates their experience.
Well, that's probably a simple way of saying it in the book. What they were telling me was that this higher self and your physical self knows what you need to learn in this physical life. And you set up your life so that you can learn and experience the stuff that you're supposed to gain the knowledge about. And the higher self works with you on this. And so you've created this scenario. I was told one time, think of it as a 3-ring binder. You have this whole plan here, and you flip a page and you go, okay, I'm now experiencing this. And suddenly, okay, now it kind of turned to the right, and now I need to add a new page. So you take that other page out and you add a new page. You're constantly changing your life. You're constantly making alterations to what your plan is. But the ultimate goal is that maybe you needed to learn love, maybe you needed to learn how to interact with your families or other people or who knows what. And so you're creating that stuff. We're all very creative people on multiple levels. And artists also are, I was told, were teachers that bring this knowledge into the world to create things, to teach things, to help with other people in creating their own lives also.
There must become a point where you remember other previous lives, like you're kind of being integrated back into your soul. And at this point, our perspective would change from being who we are in this life to an experienced, ageless entity. Is that right?
That's what they were telling me. And the interesting thing about it is that the personality that you may have been in, 1497, you can tune into that personality and you can go, okay, what was it that I learned as that personality in 1497? Okay, now did it trickle forward into who I just was? And how does it interact with each other? And so all of your past life personalities are like in this gigantic database. I'm going to keep using the word database because that's the best analogy. In this whole big database of who you are as that massive spiritual being. And so every life that you did something, what did you achieve in that life? What did you fail at that life? Let's put it all together and see how we did as this one big gigantic group of personalities. And you'll see your successes, you'll see your failures, you'll be able to see all the things that you still need to learn.
And do you have any insight into what may happen to a soul when they've progressed to a state beyond reincarnation?
As I was told that, I was talking about those 4 or 5 entities, whatever you want to call them, that were very high level, that were talking to me. What they were saying was that they were no longer in physical bodies because they're more like consciousness. And basically that's what we are to a degree, is that we're just this big consciousness, and that travel in earthly bodies or travel in after-death bodies. But then, as you progress even further, they were telling me that they didn't need those ideas of even any sort of bodies, that they were just knowledge. They were just all this real higher knowledge. They also told me that people can go on to other realities. And they were telling me that, we focus on the earth right now, and this is where we live. And they were telling me that in other realities, they're living different types of lives over there. And in the room that we're all in at the moment, there could be other realities that are right next to us, other people that aren't even aware that we're in the same room or that they're in the same room. And I thought that was quite interesting because I had never thought about that before. But every so often when you see a glimpse moving or something in the side peripheral of your vision, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a spirit that knows you or anything. It could be just a glimpse of somebody walking through from a different reality. When I think back to being a 15-year-old kid, and growing up listening to this stuff and everything, it was just like mind expanding. The thing about it is that they told me that it doesn't mean that I'm anything more special than anybody else, because everybody has this ability. Everybody moves on after death and becomes that big, expansive knowledge, And everybody does have interactions constantly 24/7 with their higher selves and everything. It's just how much we tune into it. Like in my book, I said, you could be in a house with maybe 8 rooms. But if you only focus on one room, you don't realize there's 7 other rooms there. But when you start focusing on the other room, suddenly this whole big new awareness starts happening.
And do you feel that we can all get to a point where we could have spirit communication?
I do, actually. And I actually feel like some of us do that aren't even aware that that's what's happening. I've talked to some people who said, it was the funniest thing, I smelled my mother's perfume and she's passed away for 20 years ago or something. Well, I tell people, just stop for a second. Don't just push it away and go, well, this is ridiculous. Actually stop for a moment and kind of see what you feel about this. That could be a communication in itself and everything. When my other grandmother, on my father's side, passed away, she appeared at the end of his bed, and he looked at her appearing there as, oh my God, this is terrible. I'm having a nightmare. And he freaked out about the whole thing. I told him later, I said, that was your mother. Your mother never did anything wrong to you or anything. And so what people need to do when we have those kind of experiences, stop, pause, and kind of take it in and see what we feel about it. And that will allow you to start growing and becoming more aware of the spiritual stuff that's happening around you.
And when you do pass over and you're in that other space, whatever you would call it, do you know what you do there? There's a life review and what have you, but is there recreation time?
Well, what I actually was told was that there is a lot of things that happen. And if you want to take a rest, you can take a rest for a while. If you want to paint, like you were saying, yeah, go ahead and paint. Maybe in a past life you were a painter, and so you want to interact with that past life. So maybe that's what you're doing. But it's not all like a Club Med or whatever it used to be called or whatever. It's actually a learning experience. So if you're taking time to paint, maybe you're learning something about this. You also meet up with people that you've known in the past, and you still have relationships with these people. And so you still go on interacting with these people that you know, but also at the same time, you can have your alone time to reflect and to learn and everything like that. And it was quite amazing to be told this, because we have been taught, at least in the Christian environment, that we die, we go to the pearly gates, and then suddenly everything is bliss, and we never have to do anything ever again. And that's not quite it. And a lot of people that pass over, if they have beliefs in certain things, like let's say religious beliefs, or even if they were having traumas about themselves and they believe that they need to be punished or whatever like this, they don't go like to hell or anything like this, but when they pass over, they may believe, I need to be punished, and so temporarily they may create that environment, or they may think, well, definitely there's nothing after life and after death, and so then they suddenly see darkness. And then they go, wait a second, but I'm still thinking, I'm still feeling. This isn't just the end of it all. And then suddenly they wake up from that darkness. And that's when, the guides continue to work with them to move them forward. So the environment is a very creative learning environment. But I always want to emphasize that where we're at now in this physical life is also a very creative environment also. But we limit it based upon how we treat this physical world at the moment. And we actually need to progress. In the Bible, it says, heaven on earth. Well, that can happen, but we are caught in such a belief system that we're actually stagnant in a lot of ways, and we're actually holding ourselves back from being the true spiritual selves that we actually are.
Did you get any sense that the figures that we hear about in the religious books, it could be Buddha or Jesus, that they really did exist as people on earth just like us?
Yes, I was told that they did, that they were teachers, and they were bringing knowledge to the world so that people can progress, can become those spiritual selves personally themselves by following and listening, And the problem with it, though, is that through the years, people that have wanted control over other people deviated from the lessons, kind of put their own little bit into it to try to keep control. There's I should have really looked this up before I got on here, but there's a story that actually, there's a guy named Origen, and he was from the first century of the Christian church, and he actually taught about that we existed before birth and we existed after death. And for I don't know how many years in the first part of the Christian church this was taught. I think about somewhere around 462, all these bishops got together, and this one bishop said that he could not imagine himself coming back poor, or especially coming back as a woman. And so they wrote it all out. Origen was taken out of the teachings of the Christian church. You can still find the writings, you can still find information about Origen, but because of this one guy had this opinion, it changed the course of the Christian church. And so it limited our beliefs on pre-life and after-death awareness. And I found that very interesting.
Did you get any information what happens just before the spirit enters the baby's body or the fetus? And have you any idea when that happens, or would it be different for different people?
Well, what I was told was that you're aware of who your parents are going to be. You actually choose your parents, and they choose you. And the physical body, and I know some people may get upset with this, but the physical body is just a physical body. And the heart beats, the fetus starts growing and everything. But what we are learning now is that the person that we are inside, the spiritual being that we are, that leaves after death, also is separate before birth. And so you kind of manage this growing fetus and everything, but you do it from this pre-life area. And the baby actually, the energy, your spiritual self, doesn't really enter the baby until the fetus is ready to take the spirit in, until you know that it's the right time. Some people may do it just before birth. Some people may do it, 6 months before they're born. It really depends on the individual. And the individual is actually in control of when they enter. And they're still interacting with the parents, even though the parents are maybe will not be aware of it. Before my first daughter was born, I actually had dreams of her before she was born, and she looked exactly like what she looks like, as a grown-up. And we were having conversations before she was even born. And it was the most amazing thing, but it's because we tuned into each other. And that's the daughter that asked me about reincarnation. There's a lot of more control than what we give ourselves credit for.
Well, there's Dr. Ian Stevenson, who's studied literally 2,500 cases of children that have past life memories. And there's one thing that he's seen a lot of is children that are born with birthmarks or birth abnormalities that are directly relatable to the life that they remember, the
right.
previous life. And he's even written a book on it called Where Biology and Reincarnation Intersect, and there's photographs in there. So it would also seem that they bring something through from the past life physically. Have you heard anything about that?
I actually had a client who, this was recent, and I had a client who was afraid of heights. And he didn't know why. He'd always had a fear of heights since he was a child. And I think he's in his 30s now. And so he came to me and I said, well, let's work on that fear of heights. So I asked him, I said, was there any trauma or anything in this life that may have caused it? And he says, no, there really wasn't. And so I said, okay. I said, I put him under hypnosis. And I said, okay, go back to where this fear of heights began. And he suddenly said, I'm laying on some grass and I'm looking up at the sky and I'm looking at the clouds and it's so nice out and everything. And it's this big, gigantic green field. And all my friends are around and we're running around, playing on this field. And then suddenly I fall into this abandoned well. And I go down and down and down, and it starts getting darker. And I'm looking up and I see my friends looking over the side at me. And I just keep going down. And nobody could rescue me, and I died. And he came out of hypnosis and he just went, what was that? And then after that whole session, he said that he now watches videos of people climbing mountains and stuff, and he's not even affected any longer. So it all went back to this past life where he fell into this well. So we must bring with us, all of these experiences. And this is what I'm talking about, the big database, where all of our past lives interact with each other. And all the experiences of all of our lives interact with the whole of who we are.
So in this book that we're talking about, is there one thing that you were most surprised by or that really stands out to you?
Actually, I think the biggest thing that surprised me was how in control we really are over our destiny and over our lives, and how we create a lot of the experiences that we have. Because, that we have in our physical life, but we also have when we pass over. So after you pass over, I think I was surprised by the fact of, oh, I work, huh? But also in your physical life, people complain, oh, this life is so hard and so, terrible, or this life is great or whatever. We don't really realize how creative we are in making our lives, our individual lives, our family lives, our neighborhoods, our countries, and our world, what they are by our creativity. And that was one thing that really surprised me. And then when you passed over, you're still being this very creative person. So I think that's the biggest thing that really, really surprised me.
Because I remember reading in the book that you said when you see something during the spirit communication, that you are also an active participant in its creation.
Yes. For instance, the spiritual soul that is my friends or loved ones that we may have, create these bodies that we can see, let's say, for even if it's only for a little instance, okay? We project upon that body what we believe they look like, and they project back to us what we believe they look like. And Kim, who I talk about in the book, she actually came back to me one time and she says, I am no longer the person that you knew. I'm actually a bigger spiritual person than what I know, and I actually don't quite look the same way as you remember me as. But when we communicate, you'll always see me as the person I was. And I thought, okay, that's pretty interesting. But that's the reason for that is that that's what we know. And so they make it as easy as possible for us to see them and to communicate with them. And you don't even have to see them. Sometimes you may feel them touch you, or you may feel them go past you, or you just may feel their emotions. And then again, I tell people, when you feel that, stop. Don't do anything else. Don't push it aside. Just stop for a moment and take that in. And that's a communication to you with a loved one. Because I have people coming to me and go, why isn't my husband talking to me? He passed away and I've been waiting and he hasn't talked to me. And I tell them, don't try so hard. Because communication is happening, but our ego self is actually like blocking it because of our beliefs. And at night, like I say, when we're asleep, we're actually interacting with these people still, even though they've passed away. But when you wake up, you go, no, that couldn't have been true. Or, no, I don't remember. I've never heard from him. Well, actually, maybe you have. So I ask people to just try to stop and listen more. And so in that way, we're a participant in the communication back and forth.
In the last episode when you're on, we talked about how even though that spirit may have been reincarnated, the previous person, the previous identity still exists in some way and you can still interact with it?
Yes, you can, actually, because of that big, gigantic database that is us. And so the personality that maybe could, is Kim, the Kim that I knew, is in that database, okay? But the person or the big spiritual entity that is Kim may have multiple names. Like she came back in a dream and she goes, "You know me as Kim, but my bigger self I refer to as Maria." And I go, "Oh, okay." Now, the person that was Kim may still be in this database, but then she may reincarnate into another life, and she may be called another name totally. And part of that personality is now reincarnated into the world, but you can still talk to that database. You can still communicate with Kim, and actually that database could actually communicate with a person that now is reincarnated. I don't know if anybody out there has ever had this happen, but I've had this happen on and off, where I've actually had dreams of talking to people that I don't know in this physical life. But when I talk to them, they say that they are like living in Los Angeles. I live in Boston, but we're having this interaction with each other. Or, I've talked to somebody and everything, and then, 6 months later, I meet them. My first wife, I had this dream about meeting this woman, and they told me her name, and they actually showed me what her father looked like and showed me what the house that they lived in looked like. And when I woke up, I drew a diagram of the house. And when I finally did meet her about 6 months later, I told her about this dream, and then I showed her the diagram of the house, and she goes, "That's where we live." And so it's just another example that our whole awareness of things is so vast that, in our physical life, we're very much in a little tube. But if we allow ourselves to go further, we suddenly realize that all this knowledge is out there and we can tap into it.
Can you tell us where we can get hold of your book?
Sure. My books are on Amazon. You can look up my name, Cliff Aguirre, or you can go to my website, cliffaguirre.com, which is spelled Aguirre, for anybody that needs to have the exact spelling of my last name. All those links will send you to my website that lists all the books on there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Cliff, for being my first time repeat guest. It's been a great conversation.
It's always great talking to you.
Well, that was another great conversation with Cliff Aguirre. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to get in contact, you can contact me at my website, which is www.pastliveshypnosis.co.uk. And if you'd like to subscribe, leave a review, that would be fantastic.